I would be remiss, Eric and I would be remiss if we didn't mention your other books that you have. And a book that just came out is Mothering Mother Earth: The Rise, Fall, Resurrection, and the Evolution of the Goddess. Right?
Right.
And obviously, is this a more historical book?
It's strictly historical. It is a walkthrough, but it I think especially the ancient period is something that few people realize the patterns of life
Yeah.
from the goddess cultures in the past. I remember even when I was studying history as an undergraduate and as a graduate student, one of my mentors said, well, they weren't that influential. And I thought, well, you're a man and you don't want to believe that.
Right.
And,
Right.
and, you know, in that area where, Lesbos, that
Mm-hmm.
island, and
Mm.
Sappho becomes famous for creating a community of women. And we don't know exactly what was going on if they were all lesbians, but that's where the word lesbian comes
Wow.
from, the
I
island of
didn't know that.
Lesbos. Yeah, and
Wow.
Sappho. And she was a poet and she wrote about their experiences, but they in the Minoan Greek culture, not far away from Lesbos, the Cretans, the Minoans gave a lot of honor to women, and women were warriors, and I don't know if you've ever been to Knossos when you were over in Greece,
Mm-mm, mm-mm. I
Larry,
don't
but
think so.
yeah,
Mm-mm.
you can the old palace and grounds of Knossos there on Crete were resurrected in the late 1800s when Dr. Charles Evans of England discovered it. And at first he said, well, there must have been courts of chatty women because you see them in the pictures. And later discoveries, of course, and all the art, when it's put in place, you see, well, they weren't just chatty women. They were seafaring women, and they're warriors,
Wow.
and they were mothers, and they were leaders in society. And it became clear he couldn't deny what they continued to uncover about the women in that society.
Wow.
So we're not saying that every society of women was the same, but as Greek culture and the Greco-Roman world developed, women were subordinated and put in the back room. I don't know if you watched the series on Rome or any of the other
No.
series that have been um, dramatically presented in movies, but it is absolutely authentic that women were not
Wow.
supposed to appear in the room with the men. The men dined together, but the women ate in the
Mm.
back room. The women served them and then disappeared into the back room.
Wow.
So it was an
Wow.
important discovery to realize that so many of these Mediterranean cultures, women, there are monolithic goddess images and then small goddess images that the women would take into the tents even when they were told no, we're,
Wow.
we're Christians now. Okay, good. Well,
Mm.
I'm going to take my icons into the tent and privately I will worship them. So
Wow.
it's there in the British Museum. It's in the museum there at on Crete. I'm trying to Heraklion is the city where we stayed, and then went out to Knossos to tour that. And that was after I presented my paper at that second international conference on European history. So I've been steeped in women's real stories, and I'm
Mm.
published in them, and that's what I compiled together in that book to understand when did women become subordinated, and when did they have to hide in the other rooms and not
Wow.
mingle with men. That was after the warrior cultures developed and men were being worshipped. The first marathons in Greece,
Mm-hmm.
they're building their bodies, and they're building their
Right.
bodies in order to be strong for society and go to war, and women were diminished at that point. So
Oh.
my students immediately, when I created my women's history course, wanted to know what when did that happen. So that's what I was digging for. And the papers
Mm.
I presented at Oxford and at Athens, was steeped in that research. And they were
Wow.
both published. And so I put that book together from my findings.
Wow.
And it brings
That's
it into the modern era and women that are trying to survive in third world countries,
mm.
like the women of the Chiapas Highlands in Mexico and the Chipko movement in the Himalayas of northern India, when they would throw themselves around the tree. Don't cut these ancient trees down because there's an ecosystem down here, and they gathered herbs under those trees. And so the British, when they came through and began to destroy that environment, they were destroying the medicinal herbs under those trees. So the women began to strap themselves to the trees. And when you talk about the tree huggers, they were the original ones saying,
That's what first thing that popped in my mind.
Wow.
yeah, yeah, they were the original tree huggers, and they were just trying to, because they were the medicine women, and they passed it on to their daughters. So the
Wow.
Chipko
Oh.
movement, I wrote about four movements, and one was the Kenyan agricultural women, and they developed after the British withdrew from Kenya. And now, what do the men there want to do? They want to go back to the old traditional chiefdoms,
Right.
and which means, gosh, we're even going to be more subordinate now. So
Mm.
they began to develop agriculture, and men depend on eating the agriculture. So that's how they
Right.
survive.
Right.
So that's what these stories are about. I'm just amazed at how people who are just put in the background and told you don't have a brain or an ability. Believe me, men are superior. And so
Mm.
they found a way to survive
Wow.
the horrors they were going through. So
My God. My God, Sarah. My God. You
Wow.
know, I don't I think uh, I know that you're an amazing woman. You are highly educated about every subject that you've written about, talk about. Obviously, women's history is the first and foremost. Uh, and it's very, very evident in everything you've written. From Cooksville, USA, to Mothering Mother Earth, history needs to be preserved, and history needs to be
Mhm.
taught from a very honest perspective,
exactly.
not from a lens of a biased or
Bias.
anything else, right?
Right.
But a very honest perspective. And I think whenever somebody is honest, they get the feeling that they're being told something that's true. Um, and I can tell you, Sarah, that just from Cooksville and Mothering Mother Earth, there is a truth and a passion there, and I appreciate you so much.
Thank you.